Welcome to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. My special guest today is Karl Fredrickson, editor of the Dick Berggren's Speedway magazine. And first off, Karl, thank you so much for being on. That's an excellent job you're doing with the Speedway magazine.
You're kind, and it's a privilege to join this afternoon.
How many years have you worked with Speedway?
So I joined the team in August of 1992. So I just celebrated 30 years here, and I'm one of the new guys. So
wow.
Yeah, Joyce and Bruce and Dick and that whole gang, they started. Well, Dick was 77, Joyce was 78, Bruce is 1984. So you can tell I'm one of the new guys. However, in 1999, we were bought by a competition and shown the door. But we stayed together as a team, and we launched Speedway Illustrated together, and it's a privilege, and that's what we do.
And your subscription base is how many?
So we go to 40,000 readers a month.
Oh, that's awesome. And having done that type of work, how long does it take you to put out a magazine?
Right up until deadline, just like you know. There's no second save. That's why and that's one of the big appeals to me, is that we can't change it. For folks who don't know, if you're interested, you can go to our website. We have a little video on there about how the magazine is created, and it goes through the editorial process of coming up with ideas and stories and concepts, to reviewing it editorially, to laying it out graphically, to printing it in Indiana where it gets printed and then distributed around the country. And you know, I'm proud of the work we do, and that we get it done every month, and we have a product that we're proud to present to people, and it's really fun and exciting, because we can't take it back. As you know, in printing, you've got to blend. It's a super highway. So your product has to be ready to go on time every month, year after year. And for the printer, you have to blend seamlessly into their production schedule. And once it's gone, we own it. I've owned every misspelled word that I've published for 30 years. And they hurt, but they make you work harder next month.
I'm with you, Karl. I understand it completely. Been there, read the articles and that we have done for our publications, and I read it. Then it was proofread, and then here it comes out in print, and the first thing you see, look at that spelling mistake. How could three of us miss that, having read it umpteen times, and you make the spelling mistake in there, or you get a fact wrong?
Oh, it's tough, but you know what? We can't change it. And certainly some digital things today have great benefit, and it's provided some good things. But I love the fact that we can't change our magazine in print. It makes us get it right the first time as best as humanly possible.
Yeah, I love the articles because there's a lot of work that goes into it. You put the human side with it, and that's tremendous, because having been a race car driver for 48 years, why, I understand it and understand the racing, and so the articles are just really well done. Speaking of that, while I'm thinking about it, Karl, it seems like to me that I was at the Nationals IMCA, and you were up there at the same time. You and I visited just for 30 seconds, and then you got out of the journalism section and went out on the track and went out and raced. Did you do that?
Yes.
And you won. And you won, as I recall.
Wow, I'm flattered you would know that. Yeah, that's extraordinary. It's I've got one win on dirt, and it was a big one. And that was 2005 that happened. Yep. And it was a borrowed race car and a one-off deal, and to find myself in victory lane that night was, I was the most shocked guy in the place.
Well, I enjoyed it because I watched you go out and get in the car, and I thought, well, how's this going to work here? I mean, because he's not a regular in that car. I don't know what he has for racing experience. And you took off and did a real good job. You led all the way, and you just did an awesome job. While I'm thinking about it, let me ask you a couple of trivia questions. Who won the first NASCAR race?
Oh my gosh, you would have to do that to me. Well, I know he's driving car number 34 after the disqualification, and now I'm nervous to be on the show, so you'll have to give me this.
Okay. Well, where was he from? Do you know?
Nope.
All right. Well, let me help you with it. The first winner was Jim Roper from Halstead, Kansas. Right. And do you know where the first NASCAR trophy is?
I would say in Kansas, at your museum.
Right down the hall, where you're at the Kansas Auto Racing Museum right now. While I'm throwing out some trivia questions, do you know who won the first NHRA, the drag racing series? Who won that first race?
No, and at least I don't feel bad about that because that's not in my wheelhouse as much.
Well, the owner of the car was Paul Flynn, and it was the first national championship race was held in Kansas. We had that first trophy as well, just off to my left over here. So we're home where we're filming this is at the Kansas Auto Racing Museum. We're going to cut away, take a break, Carl. We're going to be right back. Stay with me. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. My special guest, Karl Fredrickson. And Karl, you're the editor, of course, of Speedway Illustrated. Now, having been in some of that production, it is a major job to figure out what articles you're going to write, what stories you're going to get, making the contact with those individuals, finding enough time to get out and do it and put a quality program together. How in the world do you do all of that?
Well, I am surrounded by incredibly talented people who care deeply about the product we produce. And they are dedicated. They're like family. Although if you heard us on a conference call, you wouldn't be sure we actually like each other because we talk with each other with putting the reader first. And I think that's what happens. And they take me to task. I'm the boss. I'm the publisher. But if they think I'm off base, they'll let me know in no uncertain terms that it is. Maybe we had an editorial conference call yesterday. We have one every week, and all the editors gather and we talk about what's going on at the local speedways in the industry, with business, with the tires, with the cost of parts, all those things. How many fans were at the track? What was the car count like? Where were you? And from that starts the conversation. And we start to discuss things about what will be next. Randy LaJoie, who had a stellar career as a race driver, two-time Busch Grand National champion, has focused on safety and building seats. And he'll call from time to time. He actually called on Monday and said, gee, some of these pavement late models, I think they're getting away from safety. I think we've been lulled into a false sense of security without people getting hurt too badly lately. And they're taking out some bars I think they need to be in there. So that's one of the conversations we had yesterday. And we'll discuss that and debate the value of whether or not we should be doing that, who should be quoted in the story, which chassis builders we should talk with. And that's where it comes. And the ultimate umbrella is we want to help people who enjoy the sport from the living room discover that there are racetracks right around the corner where they can go sit with family and friends in the warm sunshine and enjoy spirited competition right in their backyard. And maybe some of those people will be inclined to venture into the pits. And we want to encourage them to do that and get involved on a participant level. And for those who do, or even become race drivers themselves, we want to show them how to go faster, be safer, and spend wiser. And that's the goal of Speedway Illustrated. So those are the things we have in our minds as we enter into our editorial conference calls, and the magazine is what results from those conversations.
Well, what I've found, Karl, is as I look through the magazine, of course, I love just exactly what you said, that what's taking place is, we'll interview this person, and he's raced for 25, 30 years, or she's raced for many years, and then what happens is that we put an article out, and then it comes out in the Speedway, and you look at it and you say, gosh, I've never heard of that person. Well, so what? so what? Because that person has raced for many, many years and is well known within a small circle perhaps, and is a good racer. And there's a lot of work that goes into racing, building a car, maintaining it, putting sponsors together, learning how to go fast, and then, as the old story goes, and then learn how to go faster. And and that's what it takes. And you know, we had the pleasure of being at Daytona a number of times, and I remember a new driver coming up and talking to Neil Bonnet, and he came up and he said, "Can you tell me how to be successful as a race car driver?" And Neil gave him the answer to it, but the guy thought he was just kidding, because Neil said, you know, well, the first thing you got to do is you got to learn how to go fast.
Yeah.
And then you've got to learn how to go fast through traffic. And then you've got to learn how to go faster. And the guy just laughed and walked off, but what Neil told him was exactly right. All of those things were exactly right. And I love the articles that you put in. You had John Schneider in one not too long ago, and then when I pick up the next edition, why, you've got somebody I haven't heard of, but it doesn't matter. There obviously is a good race car driver. And I used to have people who would ask me, they said, well, Doug, are there good race car drivers at NASCAR? Are there good local racers? I said, I have seen really good local racers and bad local racers. I've seen really good drivers at the highest level, and I've seen bad drivers at the highest level. And so there's a mixture that takes place in there. And you've seen the same thing, no doubt.
Sure. Many, many times. And I love being able to tell the stories of folks who may otherwise be off the radar. That's one of the things that I'm really proud to do with somebody who's not too far from you, Ken Schrader. Each year we present the Real Racer of the Year award. And as an individual or a small business, I could never afford to hire Ken to participate in this program, but he loves it. And he loves what we do. And he loves the idea that we find somebody like a Riley Reynard, who has struggled with muscular dystrophy his entire life. And despite his father needing to push him over in a wheelchair and lift him up and put his teenage son in the car, and the disease had progressed to a point where his muscles were so weakened that he would have to take a hand off the steering wheel and push his leg down at the knee to press the accelerator harder. And despite that, Riley won a feature in stock car racing over 24 other dirt track cars, good racers. And boy, what a story. What a gentleman of inspiration to all of us, that if you're struggling with needing to get through anything, you can look to a guy like Riley Reynard and see success that comes from the heart. And it's a privilege to have those stories in our pages. And if we've done one of those like Riley and recognized him with the Schrader Award, we've done 1,000 over the years, and every one is a privilege to publish.
And Kenny Schrader is such a nice guy. We raced against him when he was racing in Missouri, and so we raced with him lots of times. Really a nice guy, just a really nice guy. And that's about all I can say. He's just really a good guy, and he's an excellent driver. We're going to cut away and take a break real quick. We'll be right back, Karl. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with Karl Fredrickson from the Speedway Illustrated, and he's the editor, and he takes the heat when something's wrong, and he shares the credit when it all works well. So, Karl, what do you want to share with us?
Well, I was talking a little bit about Ken Schrader and the Real Racer of the Year award, and one of the things he always says is when we go through the selection process is that he wants someone who's suffered at this deal for a little while. You know, somebody who's raced. It's a hard sport to stay in. And there was a racer in New York named Lou Lazzaro, and he used to say the greatest compliment a racer can pay himself is longevity. You can get in and overspend and maybe win a feature or two, but if you can stay at this game for years, decades, that's really saying something, because that's matching your brains with your bravado. It's matching your resources with your ego, and that's a good point. But one of the guys who's one of your neighbors who stepped away from the sport is someone who's very much involved with the magazine even today, and he's a wonderful human being. And I've had so many opportunities to spend time with Carl Edwards that he. I guess I would be remiss if I didn't mention just what an extraordinary person he is, inside and out. He's exceptional. He really is. If you don't mind, you indulge me. I could tell you.
You go right ahead.
You'll be mad at me for sharing.
No, you go right ahead, because Carl was here about a few days before he announced his retirement. He stopped through here on his way back to Missouri.
Yep. It's a great guy. I've got a million of these, but I won't share too many. One was at Loudon a few years ago. We were working on a story together, and he won the Xfinity race that afternoon. It was nationwide at the time. And so it's just him and me and his PR guy. The TV cameras are gone from Victory Lane. The radio people are picking up their cables. And he said, "Hey, Jess, is Jess around? There's a young lady at Loudon. She's wheelchair bound. She's had some challenges. And her name is Jessica Schwinard." And they said, "Yeah, she's right over here." And Carl walked over. He signed the trophy and put it in her lap. And his PR guy, Randy, said, "I cannot believe him." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "He told her a year ago that if he won the race, he would give her the trophy. And 1,000,000 miles and 1,000,000 fans and 1,000,000 laps later, he remembered. He put it in her lap. And she clutched that trophy so tightly. And he started to make his way to the media center for the press conference. And as he walked away, I said, "Jessica, who's your favorite driver?" And she said, "Jeff Gordon." So I thought, and I just saw Carl wave like this, never turned around. So we still laugh about that. But what an extraordinary person. What an incredible, and there are a million. I've had the privilege of spending time with him quite a bit, and there are a million stories like that. Guy's a tremendous human being.
Well, didn't Carl say, "Well, who's your second favorite driver?"
I wish you were there. That would have been perfect. We might have got down like 10th or 15th before we found Carl.
That would have even made it more funny. How do you settle in on your feature story for your magazine? I mean, how do you do that? Somebody suggests, "Why, hey, let's take a look at a mini stock or any of the stock cars, as opposed to a John Schneider or somebody like that." How do you do that?
Well, and point of fact, it was I heard that John was racing dirt track cars, and I reached out through the studio and tried to get in touch with them and communicate. Nothing, just crickets, no answer, nothing. And so Carl and I happened to be talking, and I mentioned that I was hoping to get in touch with John Schneider. He says, "Oh, I know John. I'll tell him you're looking for him and give me a phone number." And 5 minutes later, I'm on the phone with Bo Duke, and he's saying, "Come to Louisiana. We'll talk about dirt track racing." So we did. And for those two, it was funny. I said, how did you guys meet, to Carl? And he said that he had just won the race at Las Vegas. He's walking back to his motorhome, carrying the trophy by himself, wearing the fire suit. And the General Lee pulls up with Bo Duke driving and says, "Get in." And that's how they met. And between the two of them, they conspired to take that car out on the racetrack and do some laps in the middle of the night. I can't imagine the scene, but and so that's how that all developed. We accept story ideas from people who reach out to us through social media or email, which I prefer, and they say they send us a note at info@speedwayillustrated.com, and it comes right to me, and they say, "Hey, there's a fellow out here, and he's special because X," and it's tough. You have to be able to write a story about a guy in Maine that's interesting to someone in Yuma, Arizona. And honestly, today, there are so many female winners and champions. We get a lot of requests for young people, or females to be written about because they're the first this or that. Gee whiz, I think we're all just race drivers. And I need something a little bit more than that to consider for a story. I think that I want to know, does she work on the car? Does she adjust the valves? Is she welding on? It's not a prerequisite for racing, but it is something that we hold dearly in our magazine, that's part of what makes you a racer, is that you know where the tools are. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or woman, if you're a child or an adult. It's kind of your thing, because as you know, someone who works on their own race car and pays the bills tends to be more respectful of the other folks on the speedway who pay their own bills and fix their own race cars, and they're too expensive and they're too much work for nonsense. And I'm sure you've seen it and I've seen it. There's people out there who have no regard for other people's property. That's not racing to me. I want to see somebody do something special that I can't do with an automobile. That's what I'll pay to see.
And I agree with you, Karl. I think you're dead on with it. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm Doug Thompson, and my special guest, Karl Fredrickson from Dick Berggren's Speedway Illustrated magazine. And one of the questions that I can't help but ask, because it comes up some, is what do you think the state of racing is right now? Is it going down? Is it going up? Is it stabilizing? What do you think?
Oh, I keep hearing Billy Joel ringing in my ear saying, the good old days weren't always good, and tomorrow ain't as bad as it seems. On a short track level, I see bigger events, but they're more pocketed. Some of the weekly tracks are struggling, especially on pavement. I hope it turns around on those. But my retailer friends tell me they're doing a really robust business. So I think things are good. They can always get better. At a NASCAR level, I think the new car was more of a success, injuries aside, and we're addressing that in the magazine. But from a competition standpoint, we saw teams we wouldn't normally see contending for wins and even championships. My father-in-law, Pat, he keeps telling me he's a lifelong racing fan and a wonderful man. He says, I don't even know who these guys there are anymore. They're all new. But every Sunday he watches the race, and he has a story at the end. And I think Ross Chastain at Martinsville gave us all something to talk about. What was that? A good idea, a bad idea? But it was sure something people were talking about. New Hampshire Motor Speedway and some other tracks had bigger crowds this year than they've had in recent years. And guys like Ryan Flores, who are along pit road and work for Penske, great people and eager to share with fans about what it takes to pit stop one of the new cars. Good stuff going on.
All right. Karl, thank you so much for taking time to visit with me. And we're going to put the contact information up for you, and keep going what you're doing with Speedway Magazine. You're doing an awesome job. Thank you for being with us.
It's been my privilege, Mr. Thompson. I hope you call on me when I can do something for you in the Kansas Auto Racing Museum.